The endless void of space stretched before Marcus Chen's weathered salvage ship, the Lucky Star. Stars twinkled like scattered diamonds against the black canvas, but Marcus wasn't admiring the view. His eyes were fixed on the flashing red light on his console that had suddenly caught his attention. Emergency distress beacon detected, his ship's AI announced in its usual monotone voice. Source: research vessel. Distance: 2.4 million kilometers. Marcus ran his calloused hand through his short black hair, a habit he'd developed during his decade of solo space operations. The signal's location was way off his planned salvage route, and his fuel reserves were already running low. But something about this signal felt different. As he pulled up more details on his screen, his eyes widened. The beacon had been active for over 3 days, and his logs showed that at least 15 ships had passed within range during that time. Not a single one had responded. "Show me the vessel details," Marcus commanded, taking a sip from his coffee mug emblazoned with Earth's OK Est Salvager. The information scrolling across his screen made him sit up straighter. It was a Lizarian research vessel, one of those high-tech ships belonging to the blue-skinned, bioluminescent species known for their advanced biotechnology. The Lizarians usually traveled in well-protected convoys. Finding one of their ships in distress was unusual. "Warning," the AI chimed in. "Vessel is caught in degrading orbit around Pulsar PSR 2419. Radiation levels: critical. Rescue attempt not recommended." Marcus snorted. No wonder nobody stopped. They all probably ran their risk calculations and decided it wasn't worth the trouble. He pulled up the detailed scan results. The Lizarian ship's radiation shielding was failing, and its orbit was slowly decaying toward the pulsar's deadly embrace. Without help, the ship would be torn apart by gravitational forces within 48 hours. "How many life signs?" Marcus asked, already plotting a course adjustment. 5 detected, all showing signs of radiation exposure. Species: Lizarian. Gender markers: female. Marcus nodded slowly. Young Lizarian scientists, probably. Their species was famous for sending their brightest minds into space for research, often straight out of their education pods. Through his viewport, he could see larger ships passing in the distance, massive cargo haulers, and sleek military vessels. All of them had the equipment and resources to attempt a rescue, but their transponder signals showed they were maintaining their courses, deliberately ignoring the distress call. "Calculating fuel requirements for rescue attempt," his AI stated. "Warning: diversion will require use of emergency reserves." "Calculate all you want," Marcus replied, his hands already moving across the controls. "We're going." The Lucky Star groaned as he turned her toward the distress signal. She wasn't the prettiest ship in space. A patchwork of repairs covered her hull, and her engines were at least 2 generations out of date. But she was sturdy, reliable, and most importantly, equipped with top-notch salvage gear that might just be useful for a rescue. As he accelerated toward the Lizarian vessel, Marcus thought back to his days as an emergency responder back on Mars. Never leave anyone behind. That had been their motto. It didn't matter if it was a dusty collapse in the mining tunnels or a pressure breach in the dome farms. Everyone deserved a chance. "Beginning long-range scan of target vessel," the AI announced. Marcus cracked his knuckles and started reviewing the rescue protocols on his secondary screen. The Lizarians might have fancy biotechnology and superior intelligence, but sometimes what you really needed was good old-fashioned human stubbornness and a willingness to take risks that defied logical calculation. "Hang in there," he muttered toward the distant distress signal. "Help is coming, even if it's just a human in a beat-up salvage ship." Marcus's ship shuddered as it approached the damaged Lizarian vessel. The pulsar's deadly radiation made his radiation meter click faster with each passing second. Through his main viewport, he could finally see the alien ship clearly. Its sleek bioorganic hull design was beautiful, but large cracks ran across its surface like spider webs. "Radiation levels increasing," his AI warned. "Hull integrity at 92%, and falling. "Open a communication channel," Marcus ordered, adjusting his ship's position to match the damaged vessel's orbit. The screen flickered to life, revealing 5 Lysarian faces. Their blue skin had a sickly pale tone, and their natural bioluminescent patterns were flickering weakly, a clear sign of radiation sickness. They looked young, probably fresh graduates on their first research mission. "This is Marcus Chen of the salvage ship Lucky Star," he said clearly. "I'm here to help." The Lysarians exchanged glances before one of them spoke. Her universal translator converted her musical language into English. "Human, our calculations show rescue attempt has 8.2% success probability. Logic dictates you should save yourself." Marcus couldn't help but smile. Typical Lysarian response. All numbers and logic. "Well, good thing humans aren't very good at math. I'm coming in closer." He guided his ship carefully, using the pulsar's radiation patterns that his eye was tracking. Years of salvage work had taught him how to navigate dangerous spaces. The Lysarian ship's orbit was degrading faster than expected, but that only made him more determined. "Your vessel's specifications indicate insufficient shielding for prolonged exposure," another Lysarian scientist observed, her large silver eyes showing confusion at his actions. "Then we'll have to work fast," Marcus replied. He activated his ship's mechanical salvage arm, a sturdy piece of equipment designed for hauling space debris. "Your ship's docking ports are damaged, but I've got another idea." The Lysarians watched in bewilderment as Marcus used his salvage arm to grab pieces of nearby space debris, fragments of their own ship's outer hull that had broken off. With careful maneuvering, he positioned these pieces to create a makeshift radiation shield between the ships. "Impossible," one Lysarian whispered as she watched her own ship's monitoring equipment. "He's using the bioorganic debris to absorb the radiation. Our most advanced computers didn't calculate this possibility." Marcus grinned as he worked the controls. Sometimes you don't need a computer. You just need to try something crazy and hope it works. The salvage arm extended again, this time carrying a portable airlock tube, standard salvage equipment for accessing damaged ships. With precise movements born from years of practice, Marcus guided it toward a stable section of their hull. "Warning," his AI announced. "Power fluctuations detected in primary systems." "Noted," Marcus grunted, focusing on his work. The Lysarians' faces showed a mix of fear and fascination as they watched him execute his rescue plan, one that defied their statistical models. "But why?" the first Lysarian asked, her translator struggling to convey her emotional tone. "Other ships, larger, better-equipped ships, they all calculated the risks and chose to leave us. Why does a human in a salvage vessel attempt the impossible?" Marcus locked the airlock in place, creating a secure passage between the ships. "Because where I come from, we don't abandon people in need just because a computer says it's risky." He checked the seal readings and nodded with satisfaction. "Airlock secure. Grab any essential research materials you can carry. We're getting you out of here." The Lysarians hurried to comply, their earlier skepticism replaced by cautious hope. As they gathered their most important data crystals, Marcus kept his eyes on the radiation readings. The makeshift shield wouldn't last long, but it didn't need to. All it needed to do was hold together long enough to save 5 lives. Sometimes, he muttered to himself as he monitored the rescue operation, the best solutions don't come from fancy calculations. They come from refusing to give up. The rescue wasn't going as smoothly as Marcus had hoped. 3 of the 5 Lysarian scientists had made it safely aboard his ship, but that's when everything started going wrong. A massive radiation burst from the pulsar slammed into both vessels, making the Lucky Star's emergency lights flash red. The impact sent tools and equipment flying across the cargo bay where the rescued Lysarians huddled together, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing with fear. "Hull breach detected in Sector 4. His eye's voice crackled through damaged speakers. "Life support systems operating at 47% capacity." Marcus gripped his control panel tighter. Two Lysarians were still trapped on their research vessel, which was now spinning out of control. The makeshift radiation shield he created was breaking apart, piece by piece. Human Marcus called one of the rescued scientists, her silver eyes wide with concern. "We must tell you something. Our research, it wasn't normal scientific study." Another radiation wave hit, stronger than the first. Sparks flew from the ceiling panels, and Marcus smelled the sharp scent of burning electronics. "Whatever it is, it can wait," he shouted back, trying to stabilize his ship. "We need to get your friends out first." The oldest of the rescued Lysarians stepped forward, her blue skin almost white from radiation exposure. "No, you don't understand. We were conducting classified experiments on pulsar energy manipulation. That's why our own people abandoned us. They couldn't risk any." The connection tube between the ships felt like walking through an oven. Marcus's radiation suit sensors were screaming warnings, but he kept moving forward. Sweat ran down his face inside his helmet as he approached the sealed door where the two remaining Lysarians were trapped. 2 minutes until lethal exposure, his suit's computer announced emotionlessly. The door's control panel was dead, melted by radiation. Marcus could see the frightened faces of the Lysarians through the small window. They were gesturing frantically, trying to communicate that the door's emergency release had failed. "Of course it has," Marcus muttered, pulling out his salvage toolkit. "Nothing's ever easy." Back on his ship, the three rescued Lysarians watched through the security cameras, their natural bioluminescence flickering with anxiety. They couldn't understand why this human would risk everything for strangers. The door's locking mechanism has a 99.8% failure rate in these radiation levels, one of them calculated aloud. "He cannot succeed." Marcus heard them through his suit's radio, but ignored the statistics. Instead, he pulled out a small plasma cutter from his belt, an old tool he used for salvage work. It wasn't elegant like Lysarian technology, but it was reliable. "Stand back," he shouted to the trapped scientists, hoping they understood. The plasma cutter sparked to life, its blue flame cutting into the door's edge. 1 minute 30 seconds until lethal exposure, the suit warned. Marcus's arms burned with effort as he cut through the thick metal. The heat was becoming unbearable, and warning lights inside his helmet told him his suit's cooling system was failing. Come on," he growled, pushing the plasma cutter harder than it was designed to go. The metal began to glow red, then white-hot around the cut. Suddenly, a massive radiation wave hit both ships. Marcus was thrown against the wall, but he held onto his cutter. Through his radio, he could hear alarms blaring on his ship. "Hull integrity critical," his ship's AI announced. "Recommend immediate evacuation." The trapped Lysarians pressed against the door window, their silver eyes wide with fear. One of them held up a data pad showing calculations, their way of telling him it was impossible, that he should save himself. Marcus laughed despite the danger. "Sorry, ladies. Humans aren't good at impossible." With a final burst of energy, he finished cutting through the door's locking mechanism. Using his salvage suit's enhanced strength, he pried the hot metal apart, creating an opening just large enough for the Lysarians to squeeze through. 45 seconds until lethal exposure. The first Lysarian scientist darted through the gap, her natural grace making the movement look easy. The second one followed quickly, clutching precious research data crystals to her chest. "Go, run," Marcus shouted, pointing them toward his ship. He followed behind, his movements slower in the heavy suit. The connection tube was literally disintegrating around them now, the metal walls warping from radiation exposure. They reached the Lucky Star's airlock just as another radiation wave hit. Marcus pushed the Lysarians inside and sealed the door behind them, his gloved hands shaking from exhaustion and radiation exposure. All Lysarians secured, his ship's AI confirmed. Disconnecting from research vessel. As the connection tube detached, Marcus collapsed against the airlock wall, breathing heavily inside his helmet. His suit's radiation counter was off the charts, but he was smiling. The 5 Lysarian scientists gathered around him as he removed his helmet, their expressions a mixture of concern and amazement. By all known scientific principles, one said, what you just did was impossible. Marcus wiped the sweat from his face, still grinning. Maybe you need to update your scientific principles. Sometimes human stubbornness beats impossible odds. Looking through the viewport, they watched as the Lysarian research vessel finally succumbed to the pulsar's pull, breaking apart in the intense gravitational field. But its crew was safe, saved by what the Lysarians would later call the illogical human factor. The ability to succeed when all calculations said failure was certain. The Lucky Star drifted through the quiet of deep space, its engines running on minimal power to conserve what little fuel remained after the rescue. Inside, Marcus sat in the medical bay while the Lysarians examined him with their advanced bioscanners. Your radiation exposure levels are concerning, said Lyra, the oldest of the scientists. Her blue fingers moved gracefully over the scanner's controls. By our medical standards, you should be severely ill. Marcus shrugged, then winced at the movement. Humans are pretty tough. We evolved on a planet with lots of background radiation. The youngest Lysarian, who called herself Nova, watched him with fascination. But how did you know your rescue plan would work? We ran the calculations 27 times. Every simulation showed failure. I didn't know. Marcus replied honestly, accepting a glowing blue medicine patch they placed on his arm. I just had a gut feeling it might work. All 5 Lysarians stopped what they were doing and stared at him. Their silver eyes blinked in unison. Gut. Feeling. Lyra tested the words carefully. Your digestive system helped make decisions. Marcus couldn't help but laugh, though it made his sore chest hurt. It's just a human expression. It means sometimes we make choices based on instinct and experience rather than pure logic. The Lysarians gathered around him, their natural bioluminescence pulsing with curiosity. They reminded Marcus of eager students, despite being some of their species' most brilliant scientists. Fascinating, said Nova, taking notes on her datapad. This explains much about human achievements that our studies couldn't understand. You succeed because you don't know you should fail. As they talked, the medical patch began to work. Marcus could feel the burning sensation in his muscles fading as the Lysarian medicine repaired the radiation damage to his cells. Your medical technology is amazing, he said, watching his skin heal before his eyes. On Earth, radiation treatment takes months. Lyra nodded proudly. We excel at biochemical science. But she hesitated, her bioluminescent patterns dimming slightly. We are learning that perhaps we rely too much on pure science. Your rescue proved that. The ship's AI interrupted their conversation. Warning. Current trajectory has depleted fuel reserves. Nearest refueling station is beyond current range. Marcus sighed. They were stuck in a rarely traveled sector of space, too far from regular shipping lanes to call for help. The rescue had used more fuel than he'd expected. But the Lysarians didn't seem worried. Instead, they huddled together, their skin patterns synchronizing in what Marcus had learned was their way of sharing ideas. We can help, Nova announced excitedly. Our research wasn't just about pulsar energy. We developed new ways to enhance engine efficiency. With your permission, we could modify your ship's engines. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You want to experiment on my ship's engines? Out here in deep space. Our calculations show it would work, Lyra assured him. And if it doesn't? The Lysarians looked at each other, then back at him. We will trust our gut feelings, Nova said carefully, trying out the new phrase. Marcus burst out laughing. Now you're learning. All right, show me what you have in mind. Over the next few hours, Marcus watched in amazement as the Lysarians worked on his engines. They combined their advanced biotechnology with his practical knowledge of ship systems. When he suggested using a spare salvage cable to stabilize their modifications, they were shocked to find it improved their design by 23%. Perhaps, Lyra observed while they worked, This is why your species advances so quickly. You are not afraid to try things that seem illogical. Marcus handed her a tool, smiling. And maybe that's why we work well together. You know why things should work, and we know how to make them work when they shouldn't. Around them, the Lucky Star's systems hummed with new energy as human ingenuity and Lysarian science came together, creating something neither species could have achieved alone. The Lucky Star's newly modified engines hummed smoothly as Marcus checked their course on the main console. Thanks to the Lysarians' improvements, they would reach safe space in half the time he'd originally estimated. But something had been bothering him about their situation. Your ship's database is picking up something interesting, his AI announced. Multiple emergency broadcasts about missing Lysarian scientists. The 5 aliens, who had been discussing their research in the corner, suddenly fell silent. Their bioluminescent patterns dimmed noticeably. Marcus turned his chair to face them. Want to tell me what's really going on? Those aren't normal search broadcasts. They're calling you criminals. Lyra, the eldest, stepped forward. Her silver eyes held a mix of fear and determination. We feared telling you the whole truth would make you abandon us, like the others. Try me, Marcus said, keeping his voice gentle. I've already broken about 50 space regulations saving you. Might as well know why. The Lysarians gathered closer, their skin patterns pulsing with nervous energy. Nova pulled out a small crystal data core from her pocket. This contains our real research, she explained. We weren't just studying pulsar energy. We discovered a way to create stable wormholes for faster-than-light travel. Marcus whistled softly. That's impossible. Every major civilization has tried and failed. Not impossible, Lyra corrected. Just highly dangerous. Our government believed the technology was too risky to develop. They ordered all research destroyed. But you didn't destroy it, Marcus guessed, beginning to understand. We couldn't. Another scientist named Stella spoke up. Our calculations showed the technology could revolutionize space travel, make it accessible to everyone, not just wealthy corporations and military vessels. Nova's hands trembled as she held the data crystal. When we refused to stop our research, they sent ships to intercept us. The pulsar damage to our vessel. It wasn't an accident. Marcus felt his blood run cold. They tried to kill you. Our own government staged it to look like a research accident. Lyra confirmed. They expected the pulsar to destroy all evidence. No one was supposed to attempt a rescue. But you did, Nova added softly. A human with a salvage ship defeated their entire plan. Marcus stood up and walked to the viewport, watching the stars streak by. Everything made sense now. Why no other ships would help, why their own people had abandoned them. Your research, he said slowly, you're sure it works? We've run thousands of simulations, Lyra answered. The theory is sound. We just need a way to test it safely, Marcus finished. He turned back to face them, a slight smile on his face. You know, salvage operators like me. We know all the quiet corners of space, places where no one asks questions. The Lysarian skin patterns brightened with hope. You would help us? Stella asked incredulously, even knowing the danger. Marcus laughed. Ladies, I just flew into a pulsar's radiation field to save you. I think we're past worrying about danger. He walked over to his ship's storage unit and pulled out an old star chart. Look here, he said, pointing to a remote sector. There's an abandoned mining outpost in this asteroid field. Good place to set up a secret lab. I've got contacts who can get us equipment, no questions asked. The Lysarians crowded around the chart, their scientific curiosity overtaking their fear. They began discussing modifications needed for the outpost, their natural excitement returning. Marcus watched them with satisfaction. He'd started this day planning to salvage some space junk. Instead, he'd rescued 5 brilliant scientists and stumbled into what might be the biggest scientific breakthrough in centuries. Just promise me one thing, he said, making them all look up. When you perfect this technology, Remember that sometimes the best discoveries come from taking chances that look crazy on paper. The Lysarians nodded solemnly, their skin patterns glowing with determination. They had found more than a rescuer in Marcus Chen. They'd found a partner who understood that progress sometimes required breaking the rules. 3 months after the daring rescue, Marcus stood in the hidden laboratory they'd built inside the abandoned mining outpost. The old asteroid base had been transformed by a unique combination of salvaged equipment and advanced Lysarian biotechnology. Initial test sequence starting, Nova announced, her fingers dancing over the control panel. The experimental wormhole generator hummed to life, its hybrid design reflecting both human practicality and Lysarian brilliance. Marcus watched as holographic displays filled the air around them. What had started as a simple rescue had turned into something revolutionary. The 5 Lysarian scientists had proven that their research worked, thanks in part to human ingenuity. Energy patterns stable, Lyra reported, her bioluminescence bright with excitement. Marcus, your suggestion to use salvaged quantum stabilizers actually improved efficiency by 42%. Marcus grinned, remembering how the Lysarians had initially doubted his idea of using modified salvage parts. Sometimes the best tools are the ones with a little history, he said. Suddenly, their security system flashed a warning. Multiple ships had entered the asteroid field. On the main screen, they could see the distinctive shapes of Lysarian government vessels. They found us, Stella whispered, her skin patterns dimming with fear. But Marcus remained calm. Right on schedule, he said, surprising the scientists. Ladies, remember when I said I had friends in interesting places? As if on cue, a new fleet of ships appeared on their screens. They were a mix of vessels from various species, independent traders, research ships, and even some military vessels flying neutral flags. Meet the Galactic Science Coalition, Marcus explained. Independent researchers and scientists who believe knowledge shouldn't be controlled by governments. They're very interested in your work. Through their communications screen, representatives from dozens of species appeared. Many were scientists who had faced similar suppression of their research. We've reviewed your findings, a respected Centaurian physicist announced. Your wormhole technology, combined with Marcus's practical applications, could revolutionize space travel. We offer you full protection and support. The Lysarian government ships hesitated, clearly not expecting such powerful opposition. After a tense moment, they turned and left the asteroid field. Lyra turned to Marcus, her silver eyes shining. You planned this. Humans are good at backup plans, he said with a wink. Plus, I figured your work was too important to keep hidden forever. Better to have powerful friends when the truth came out. Nova rushed forward and hugged him, a very un-Lysarian gesture she'd learned from Marcus. Our calculations never predicted this outcome. That's because you didn't factor in the human element, Marcus laughed. We're pretty good at changing the equation. The laboratory burst into activity as scientists from various species began arriving through secure shuttles. The Lysarians watched in amazement as their small research team transformed into an interstellar collaboration. We're receiving research support offers from 17 different species, Stella reported excitedly. They all want to help develop safe wormhole travel. Marcus watched proudly as his friends shared their discoveries with their new allies. The Lysarians had changed too. They'd learned to trust instincts alongside pure logic, to take calculated risks when needed. You know, Lyra said, joining him by the viewport, when we first saw your salvage ship approaching our damaged vessel, our calculations said accepting help from a single human was illogical. And now? She smiled, her bioluminescent patterns forming beautiful patterns. Now we understand that some things cannot be calculated. Courage, friendship, trust. These human traits have value beyond mathematics. Through the viewport, they could see ships arriving from across the galaxy. Scientists, engineers, and explorers, all drawn together by the promise of new discovery. What had started with one human refusing to abandon 5 aliens had grown into something that would change space travel forever. To think, Marcus mused, all of this happened because I didn't listen to my ship's warning system about those rescue odds. No, Lyra corrected him. It happened because you showed us that sometimes the biggest discoveries come not from perfect calculations, but from having the heart to try the impossible.